Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And welcome to this episode about issues with the in-laws.
Oh, the in-laws. And this has come up quite a bit.
Why didn't you say, oh, the in-laws?
Oh, sorry, you're right. The in-laws. No, actually, we love our families. This is not about us bashing our families. However, this topic has been a source of conflict or tension or just frustration, not only in multiple sessions with couples, our private clients, in the last couple of weeks. And I think part of that is that there's been like spring break and some travel and seeing families and things like that. It's also come up with friends, not going to name anyone personally, as well as we have had our fair share of navigating some different family members. We, of course, want to keep, their information private, not give away too much, but we have
They listen to the podcast. So.
Some of them do, but we have had our challenges and different dynamics. And it's very real that we have had to make sure we are on the same team. That you and I are rock solid, because obviously our extended family, and this can also include friends in some ways, you can think about that throughout the episode, but our family, we obviously have a strong emotional tie to them. We care about them. We want our families to be united. Think about what you probably dreamed of when the two of you got together was, oh, what if our families like hang out? And oh, I can't wait to go visit your family there and here. Also, it does get complicated when they live close to you too, right? So think about that. Is your family far from you? Like we have to fly to most of our family, or do they live down the street and you see them multiple times a week? And we're going to get into a lot of those nuances and how to make sure you guys are a united team.
And the term in-laws is kind of a social faux pas for a negative connotation, right? Mm-hmm. It is interesting from a social psychology perspective. And of course, we want to start to really break this down, is that you actually have group membership in two groups. And those two groups are going to have a lot of overlap and are going to be integrated, and you sort of, want them to be able to combine. Mm-hmm. And so you have your immediate family and then the extended family being the two groups of social group membership. And both you want to belong to. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of influence, right, in what's now your extended family, which was your primary caregiver family, right? A lot of your attachment style, a lot of your initial worldview does come from that family and the culture that you grew up in. And again, you want to continue membership in both.
Mm-hmm. And you want to belong.
Yeah, but things will come up as you grow older and you get to become an adult. Sometimes in the broader scope of social psychology, you will run into times where you will have cognitive dissonance, because there's a lot of influence of social groups in our lives. Like it's probably the biggest thing for a human. And many times you just want to stay belonging in that group. So many times, even if there is a decision being made by the group that you don't necessarily agree with, you go along with it. This is for any group. Mm-hmm. Now, there does get to the point where what does cause someone to leave a group and not even care about group membership anymore is when the core beliefs of the group change and they do not align with yours at all. You could say they're even violated.
Yeah.
So we're not saying that you're in a place like that at all. We're just saying, think of these two social groups that one you belong to wholeheartedly, that when you were a kid, that was the place for safety and security. A lot of the things that you do nowadays were modeled from them. And then you get into this new group of your spouse and then any kids that you have.
You bring up a good point. And while we want to belong, and of course you have those dreams of having both your families united and you enjoy spending time with them, you want to make sure that no matter what you encounter with those family members, you two stay a united team. Because if you think about it, when you two decide to get married, you actually start a new family. You're still an extension of the two families that you come from, but at least the way we view it is that we have now started a new family. our family of 3 plus our dog right now, maybe more in the future. And we want to discover what's important to us, what our values are. And one of the points that we have here that it's important to realize is that your family also comes from a totally different background, maybe different cultures, different ways of thinking. Like if you think about every single generation, there's groupthink and there's different ways that they see the world and there's different propaganda that's influenced them and there's different cultural norms. Like,
Oh, besides that, even
mhm,
just events. I mean,
yeah.
grandparents in a depression to
Mhm.
world wars to coming out and reestablishing, the family after going off to a war to,
Mhm.
here we are. Maybe we didn't have that many external things, but you could say in the past 3 years, like those that are of the millennial generation are
Mhm.
now starting to have maybe some more external things come up. I mean, technology has had a big
Yeah.
influence. The fact that you can communicate with people around the world, that's a sort of a positive and a negative thing. It is that we're going to be adjusting our own worldview and values
Mhm.
as we grow into adults. And so you're going to start to hold to those for your immediate family. And so there's going to be some difference
Yeah.
between that and your primary extended family, which might be your parents and then siblings and then aunts and uncles. So
Mhm.
as you start to go further, there's going to be some similarity as the culture there is the same. But yeah, you just have to accept that there's going to be changes and revisions to your own value system that is going to be at least a little different.
And the implications of that, if you're like, okay, Freeman's, I get it, different generations, different cultures, different ways of thinking. Okay, I noticed that. The implications are that number one, we say this is something really important to us, and we see for our clients that you don't go to your family and gossip about each other. That your family should be the safe spaces. They should be the encouraging spaces. Because if you think about this, if Aaron were to go and tell his mom, because if they were at that level of closeness where it's like, oh, hey, how you doing? And they talked more often because some people talk to their parents very often, some daily, some multiple times. Everyone has different levels of closeness. But if you were gossiping or like just telling, oh, yeah, we got into this thing and oh, Jocelyn's been this or that, just because you related to her as someone that you vent to and talk to.
That's the right term. Yeah. Even venting, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it was
Yes, not always
necessarily
gossiping.
talking bad. And I know you weren't
Yeah.
saying that, but
Mm.
even just getting down to this is someone that you would normally vent to.
Right. And so even if you view them that way, the thing is that everything you say to your partner not only affects how your family sees your partner, which is important, you want them to have a positive perception of your partner, but if your partner then knows what you're saying, are they going to feel super comfortable at the holiday gatherings and the
Mm.
times that you all go on trips together? No. They're going to be like, "Wow." I mean, I hear this from people all the time, just like, I feel like they have the worst view of me because my partner tells me, tells them about me doing this and that. So that's rule number one that we think is really important. Again, you want your families to be the safe space, the encouraging space, and that you get to both feel loved in those environments rather than, oh, they're judging me. Oh, they think I'm the bad one. That's not a territory you want to get into. The next thing would be second to the like venting or gossiping is actually be very discerning about going to them for marriage advice for the reasons we already mentioned, but also because of the fact that they are so different. And the advice that you're going to get from those generations, while there may be some really great wisdom in there, it also might conflict with what you're focusing on or learning now. When I hear other people give marriage advice, sometimes it's not the most sound, to be honest. It might have worked for them. And so sure, go ahead and take that information in, but sometimes it's not really coming from like data or what actually works or what, I'll give you an example. And we wrote this in the argument hangover, but I'll never forget being at a friend's wedding and everyone went to go around and share a piece of marriage advice. And when it got to
Oh,
their
yeah.
parents and grandparents, a lot of the advice was within the theme of like, oh, pick your battles. And, honey, you just have to know when to like, let that one go. And while I
Though
get,
it is
yeah.
humorous too, I think there's a real belief from those situations
Hmm.
where, the other one that they say, right, is, oh, happy wife, happy life.
Oh,
That's
that's
like,
one,
oh gosh,
yes.
that's
And here's the thing,
that's
we're
not
not
great.
saying that there's not some wisdom in that. Like definitely having discernment, like our past episode of what's a thing that what do you actually need to address, what's an issue and what's just tension. But in terms of the impact that that generation or some of those generations have had is actually where they withhold things. They don't talk about them. They brush them under the rug and it leads to feeling disconnected or resentment or conflict. So sometimes advice, no matter what generation it comes from, because you could ask someone the same age group as you ask your cousin, someone like that, it might not be the most sound wisdom though.
Mhm.
It's coming from their experience, it's coming from their worldview.
Yeah, and none of that really particularly wrong. You just have to
Mhm.
think about where we are now. It's we always actually we were reading this thing about intelligence, right? And what was it? A 0.3 increase every year in
Mhm.
people's IQ, like
Yes.
for almost as long as
Yeah,
IQ assessments.
decades.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so whether that's from technology or learning, and I know there's no
Social
whole yeah, there's
context,
a whole
yeah.
other whole other part where from like a world economic perspective, it's like we really don't learn.
Mhm.
But anyway, there's this uptick in our intelligence every generation. And so new knowledge and changing of values,
Mhm.
you just have to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
So it's not that any of that was necessarily wrong, but let's say our parents or grandparents were really about creating this home stability.
Mhm.
And to do that was just going to get a job and a very traditional way of looking at family and marriage, that the husband would work and the
Wife would
female
stay
stays at
home,
home and has kids and raise them.
which is for some the circumstances, but a lot of families today are both parents working, right? So
Yeah.
that's changed a lot.
So it's just this model of traditional to conventional to where a lot of people are now is the equalitarian
Mhm.
focus of marriage, right? Where it's much more balanced. It's based on emotional regulation. It's
Partnership.
based on partnership. It's based on proactive communication about
Mhm.
needs, even if those are hard. Even if you show your children that you are going to have conflict, right? So all of these things are not necessarily how previous generations
Yeah.
were focused on or viewing raising a family.
The next point I want to get to comes from we actually put up a reel about this and it really got some traction and clearly, quote unquote, an issue. So in the reel, we act out where we're leaving one of the in laws, Aaron's parents, in the video. And he's like, okay, we got to go. Jocelyn says we have to leave because of nap time. And he says it in a really humorous way. Your acting was great in it. And basically throws me under the bus and makes me look like the bad guy. And there were so many comments,
Oh yeah,
even a
so
lot of
many.
comments of people going, this is one of the reasons we got divorced. So if that gives you any signal of how important this is, that's obviously the more of the extreme view. But what you present to your family, whether it be a decision about your parenting, when you need to go, something you're doing with your finances, a job
Mm,
decision, something going on in your marriage, whatever it is, whatever you're presenting to your family, we believe should be presented as a team. And of course, we're not saying, oh, lie about something, which you shouldn't be lying in the first place because someone even commented that. Well, what if it's not true? What if we didn't make the decision together? Well, then you didn't communicate beforehand.
yeah, yeah, I saw that a few times.
Then it was really a breakdown in that you two did not proactively
Hmm.
communicate and get on the same page and come to a mutual decision. And that would be a dysfunction in your communication. Sorry, just to put it
Wow,
out
no, that's
straight,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So if you communicate proactively, and we talk about that in our resources and our episodes about being proactive in your communication, then you would address those things before you even go to their house or you go on the trip with them. Hey, how do we want to handle this? And at times it might be like 70-30, like it goes 70% my way, 30% yours. Sometimes we give each other wins. Sometimes it's like, okay, it's really important to you, Aaron, that it goes that way. And so, you know what? Because we're partners, it's going to go your way this time. But even still, we present it as a team. Hey, we are going to do this. Hey, we have decided. Again, that would ultimately come from the fact that you two communicated about it beforehand so that you're not like begrudgingly like, oh, well, they said this and that. That's not going to give them a good view of your partner, of your marriage. It's going to, in a sense, really make your partner look like the bad guy if you do present it in the wrong light with the wrong
Hmm.
tone.
Yeah, just to close this one out, I think there's some to say about the personality trait of agreeableness. And so for children, we can have this tendency to want to be agreeable and to please our parents. And
Mhm.
so it's harder to stand up, if you will, for a unified decision that we're making.
Yeah.
Like the one in the video, right? It's like, oh, we have to leave. You and I agree that we need to have our child be hitting the nap times and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And then when it comes to actually implementing, it's like, oh, my parents wanted me to stay and there's a great gathering going on
Yeah.
and
You don't wanna hurt their
can't we just stay longer?
feelings.
And yeah, I
Yeah.
don't want to say anything. So that obviously comes up. So it's a personality dimension called agreeableness. And there was a few comments, more than just one or two, in which the partner, and I think they were female in this case, they
Mhm.
were saying, well, we agreed ahead of time. And they said, hey, I need to hit these nap times. So if my partner just needs to use me as a scapegoat
Mhm.
and he just needs to tell the parents that, hey, my female partner needs us to go,
Mhm.
they were okay with that.
Mhm.
So obviously, these were just social media comments. And I said, hey, if you are agreed upon that
Yeah.
and you're not taking that as they're throwing you under the bus or changing or altering the perception the family has, then if that's what helps you keep to your core values, in this case for parenting, then, by all means, go ahead. Now, in the broader perspective, you don't have the space to say this in social media, but I think there's an opportunity for the personal work to not be that agreeable. Like you should be able to, quote unquote, speak your truth
Yes.
to any individual, let alone the community that has your back. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I thought that was fine, but that would be an opportunity for those particular partners to think, really look at, why am I unable to speak my truth? Because likely you don't even have the best relationship that you could with your parents.
Mm.
If you're holding a lot of things back and you're overly agreeable and you're not speaking up, yeah, I mean, it's nice they accept you, but do they really? Because how much of it are you really laying out there as your true self? So, something to consider.
I'm really glad you brought up that piece about being assertive with your family too and speaking your truth. Now, there's an interesting nuance to this. And of course, we won't name names, but one couple in particular, again, this was a huge topic last week, I think, because of spring break and a lot of family visiting. But one couple in particular really experiences frequent conflicts because they actually do live near their families. So they're lucky enough to see family quite often. And what they experience is that they'll come to an agreement about, for example, how much TV time the kids get per day or the foods that they eat.
Mm.
And it feels very important to her in particular. And to him, he's like, I'm kind of neutral about it. Like, it's a little important to me. So, he, in a sense, doesn't like communicating to the family these boundaries, these requests about TV time and the food. And I think that, of course, it's nuanced, but when it comes to something that's really important to one of you, at least the way we operate in our partnership is that if it's that important to one of us, we'll still communicate it as a request or a boundary. And that goes both ways. So it's not just me that it's like, oh, it's always the important stuff to me. There are things Aaron feels very strongly about and that are important to him. And we would still say, this is what we want to do. So if we visit my family, same thing, and your family, and we really do express ourselves with what is important to us. We're not worried about causing conflict because if we express it in a kind, proactive, assertive way, then it shouldn't be a conflict with the other people. It's not pointing finger, hey, we don't like how you da 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 da. Like your approach matters. But I just want to put that out there that even if it's just important to one of you, it's still something you want to be assertive about rather than defaulting to the person it's not important to. And it's like, well, it's not that important to me, so let's not communicate it. I just don't feel that's really the fair approach to things.
And this leads us into the fourth point, even though we're making various points as we go
Mhm.
through. And that's to not put your partner into situations where they'll express, let's say, an idea or a perspective to the family at large. And then you sort of leave them out there on their own that you don't support them or you don't agree with them. And
Mhm.
so for some reason, I imagine in my mind like a courtroom where like your partner is now on the stand and you're like one of the attorneys with the rest of your family. And it's like you're quizzing or
Mm.
you're sort of attacking or pointing out the flaws to your partner because now it's just like your partner against everyone,
Mm.
including you. So you're not always going to agree with your own partner's perspective, right? So I just think there's this opportunity to have your partner's back, even if you're not necessarily agreeing. And it might take some finessing. I think ideally, just the two of you are handling a lot of these differences in perspectives, in decision making, expectations, needs, and look, that's what a good marriage is. So that when you're with a family, like you're just always united.
Mhm.
You don't want to throw your partner out there where it's like them against everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think one of the places where this can come up is trying to handle your own conflict between you and your partner now in front of
Mm.
other family members.
Oh, that can happen. We've
Oh
definitely
yeah,
had
definitely.
couples express that.
Because, well, of
Mhm.
course, your particular family members are going to jump on your side. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess I don't have an experience of anything else,
Mhm.
but your family is going to be a little bit biased in your own favor.
Yeah.
I mean, they raised you, you have similar worldview. So I think, of course, they're going to have your back. So, again, just a situation to be on the lookout for. I don't think trying to hash out a conflict in front of your family is probably the best.
Yeah, I an example I can think of is if you're all standing in the kitchen and one of your family's asking about either a parenting decision or a financial decision that you like if your partner is trying to explain themselves, you have their back, right? That you would be like, "Well, hey, we think this or we feel this way," and not have them feel ganged up on. Is that the visual?
Yeah, but then there's also another way where it's either you haven't talked about it thoroughly enough yourselves.
Mhm.
So, oh, it's a good point you bring up, something that we actually haven't addressed really ourselves. So we'll have to do that.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Okay, this next one is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, but for good reason. And that is you don't want to use I was raised this way as your explanation in
Mm.
all of your decision making. And we'll see this be a source of conflict for couples because you're going to face these big decisions that you have to make. Again, some of the big categories being finances, parenting, jobs, moves, there's many others, but those being some big categories. And in those, you have to weigh different options. And what we find is that there's many people who just refer to their upbringing as their source of information. And now, look, we're not bashing your upbringing. Maybe you actually had an incredible upbringing. Maybe there was some really great things that occurred and you want to bring that information to the table. However, at least the way we think of these big, important decisions is we actually want to make sure we're gathering many different angles. We want to get different information and data and from different experts. And so we don't want to just refer to how we were raised because then what happens if the two of you have opposing views in that? So one of you is staying in your corner like, "No, I was raised this way. This is how my parents raised me. So this is how we should parent our kids." And then the other person's like, "Well, I'm reading these books about, secure attachment and how to handle these big emotions, and this is what I think." What's going to happen? How are you two going to reconcile those things? Rather than, okay, let's bring in all the information that we can about these different methods. So, in a sense, it does take some research. And honestly, we would challenge you to level up your research for these big ones. Okay, we're not saying you should research an hour long all these restaurants you want to go to. That has a pretty small impact, right? What you're going to eat for dinner out has a relatively small impact on your life. But how you are going to raise your kids, where you're going to live, what jobs you're going to take, what you're going to do with your money, investing wise, what you're going to do in your faith, like all of those have a much bigger impact. And so, therefore, we invite you to level up your research, gather more information, because it allows us to feel even more certain, confident, and united in those decisions.
As we close this out, there is a major difference between the group membership here with the immediate family and the extended family. One of the similarities is a level of acceptance. So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to accept your family and your partner's family more or less really the way they are and how
Mm-hmm.
they show love and how they show support because that is the basis that they're coming from. The patterns or the conversations or the things they say might be different and might be giving you a different experience, but it is all love, it is all support. So you need to just accept them with their worldview, with their approach mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this means you can still express your own expectations and boundaries.
Yeah.
But here's where there's a big difference. I mean, you accept the differences within your partner, but it's much more of a negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be expressing your needs to your partner, and your partner is going to be hearing that, taking it in, considering it, and then looking at how they can change their own patterns and behavior to better meet the needs you're expressing.
Yeah.
And these are going to be changing on a frequent basis.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that for each other. Now, the other big thing is repair. When you have situations or conflicts that cause disconnection, they cause some hurt, the repair steps are very particular to a romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You really can't expect for extended family members to do the level of repair that you are going to expect within a romantic relationship
Yeah.
with your partner.
Yeah.
Now, doesn't mean you can't repair with your family, but if you know our process, we have 5R. So you can certainly come to the table from your reflections. You can say what you take responsibility for, but you might not be able to expect that a family member is going to do their reflection and now take responsibility for the impact their actions had on you, let alone come to agreements.
Yes.
Because that's where there might be a big difference. So with your partner, it's like, hey, this is a pretty non-negotiable for me. So you really got to negotiate that with your partner.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna have to make that change. With the extended family, hey, here's my agreement, my non-negotiable. They can say, well, that doesn't work for me. So takes a little bit more in the repair.
It really does. And so you brought up a really important point that I need to say this. Okay. So you guys got to hear this, because another layer to this that can feel complicated is that because of those differences, which I was talking to someone I know personally, again, keep maintaining privacy, yesterday, and there was some friction between them and one of their in-laws. We were seeing them. We saw this firsthand. And what I offered to her was about coming to some acceptance of those personality differences. But here's the key. As long as it doesn't have to do with honoring some kind of a boundary that you've expressed, when it comes to those little things that frustrate you, you can't hold those things against your partner. So really get that. If it is related to something just like a personality, a thing that frustrates you, their worldview, don't let that now become a thing you are frustrated with your partner about. So really, you're upset at one of their family members, but now you're arguing with your partner because you have some kind of an expectation of who they should be and you want your partner to handle it. Now, of course, that matters if it's related to honoring some kind of a boundary, agreement, especially if it has to do with you or your kids. But if it's just a quirk, if it's a personality, it's a thing that annoys you, don't hold that against your partner. That's where some acceptance of how everyone is different can allow you to be at more peace. They're not going to be exactly like you. You're not going to have the same worldviews, but you can seek for harmony. Now, the important thread throughout this is that you two are a team. You two are a family, and that's how you want to show up. That's how you want to stay united, no matter what you face with your in-laws and your extended family, which we know you love, and that you want to experience these great memories with them and see them. And so focus on that harmony between the two of you and your families, with you two as that rock solid team. Now, speaking of being a team, the day that we are recording this is actually the start of our 30-day couples challenge. And you now have two options. You can do the Prioritizing Us challenge or the Rebuilding Us challenge, which is the new level 2 prompts for you to repair and rebuild after being in a hard season. Whereas the Prioritizing Us challenge, we've actually had over 25,000 couples love that challenge. It focuses on your connection, conversation starters, filling your love accounts. Just when you've been in a busy season, you haven't been prioritizing the relationship, it's really a great way to get on track. So make sure that you start one of those challenges. They really are a huge hit, no matter how busy you are. So you can go to the link in the show notes. You can also go to meetthefreemans.com/links, and you'll see both those challenges as well as all of our resources that we have for you, because you want to make sure and dive in. We have so many different ways that we can support your relationship. And with that, we're so grateful that you listen. If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can hear past and future episodes. If you've been a listener, it always helps if you give us a rating. Hopefully you think we're worthy of 5 stars. We love reading your notes on that. And we cannot wait to talk to you on the next episode.